The morning sun cast long shadows across the Arizona desert as Samuel Wright guided his horse through the rocky canyon. He had been riding for 3 days straight, searching for the missing cattle that had wandered away from his family's ranch. The 24-year-old cowboy was exhausted, his water running low, and his hope fading with each passing hour. Samuel's father had warned him about venturing too far into Apache territory, but the cattle were their livelihood. Without them, the Wright family would lose everything they had worked for over the past decade. His father was getting too old to make these dangerous journeys, and his younger brother was still recovering from a broken leg. The responsibility fell squarely on Samuel's shoulders. As he rounded a bend in the canyon, Samuel heard the sound of rushing water. His horse's ears perked up, and both rider and animal quickened their pace toward the precious resource. The sound led them to a hidden oasis, where a small waterfall cascaded into a crystal-clear pool. Surrounded by green vegetation, Samuel dismounted and let his horse drink while he refilled his canteens. The cool water felt like heaven against his parched throat. He was so focused on drinking and resting that he didn't notice the movement in the rocks above until it was too late. Sharp pain shot through his shoulder as an Apache arrow found its mark. Samuel stumbled backward, clutching the wound as 3 Apache warriors emerged from their hiding places. They moved with the fluid grace of desert predators, their faces painted for war, their weapons ready. The leader, a tall man with fierce eyes and intricate tattoos covering his arms, stepped forward. He spoke in rapid Apache, his voice filled with anger and suspicion. Samuel raised his good hand in surrender, knowing that any sudden movement could mean his death. "I'm not here to fight," Samuel said, his voice hoarse from pain and fear. "I'm just looking for my cattle." The Apache leader studied him for a moment, then barked orders to his companions. They bound Samuel's hands and forced him to walk deeper into the canyon. The arrow wound burned with each step, and blood seeped through his shirt. But Samuel knew better than to complain. They walked for hours through hidden passages and secret trails that Samuel never knew existed. The Apache moved with an intimate knowledge of the land that spoke of generations of survival in this harsh environment. Finally, they arrived at a small village nestled in a hidden valley. The village was unlike anything Samuel had imagined. Instead of the savage encampment he expected, he found a thriving community with well-built shelters, gardens, and families going about their daily lives. Children played in the dust while women worked at various tasks, and elders sat in the shade sharing stories. Samuel was brought before the village chief, an elderly man whose weathered face spoke of wisdom and hard-won experience. The chief listened as the warriors explained how they had found Samuel at the sacred water source. His eyes never left Samuel's face as he weighed the young man's fate. "You trespass on sacred ground," the chief said in heavily accented English. "This is punishable by death." Samuel's heart pounded, but he forced himself to speak calmly. "I didn't know it was sacred, sir. I was just looking for water and my missing cattle. I mean no disrespect to your people or your land." The chief studied him for a long moment before speaking again. "You will stay here while we decide your fate. If you try to escape, you will die. If you cause trouble, you will die. Do you understand?" Samuel nodded, understanding that his life hung by a thread. The warriors led him to a small shelter on the outskirts of the village, where they tied his ankle to a heavy post. Left alone with his thoughts and his throbbing shoulder, Samuel wondered if he would ever see his family again. As the sun began to set, a young Apache woman approached his shelter. She moved quietly, glancing around to make sure no one was watching. Samuel estimated her to be about 20 years old, with long black hair braided with colorful beads and intelligent dark eyes that seemed to see everything. She carried a bowl of water and some cloth strips. Without speaking, she knelt beside Samuel and began cleaning his arrow wound. Her touch was gentle but efficient, and Samuel could see that she had experience treating injuries. "Thank you," Samuel whispered. Not wanting to attract attention from the guards, the woman looked up at him with surprise. Most white men she had encountered were either too proud or too frightened to show gratitude to an Apache. She continued working in silence, carefully bandaging his shoulder with the cloth strips. "My name is Ayana," she said softly, glancing toward the village center where the men were gathered around a fire. "It means eternal blossom in your language." "I'm Samuel," he replied. "Samuel, right. I'm grateful for your kindness, Ayana." Ayana finished tending to his wound and stood to leave, but she paused at the entrance to the shelter. "The Chief's Council will meet tomorrow night to decide your fate," she said quietly. "Some want to kill you as an example to other white men who enter our lands. Others want to use you as a bargaining tool with your people." Samuel felt a chill that had nothing to do with the desert evening air. "What do you think they'll decide?" Ayana met his eyes and he saw something there that gave him hope. "I think that depends on what kind of man you really are." Samuel, right. With that cryptic comment, she disappeared into the darkness, leaving Samuel alone with his fears and the growing realization that this young Apache woman might be his only chance for survival. The night passed slowly, filled with the sounds of the desert and the distant voices of the Apache discussing his fate. Samuel tried to sleep, but the pain in his shoulder and the uncertainty of his future kept him awake. He found himself thinking about Ayana and the gentleness she had shown him. It was so different from the stories he had heard about Apache cruelty. As dawn broke over the hidden valley, Samuel realized that everything he thought he knew about these people might be wrong. The Apache weren't the savage monsters he had been taught to fear. They were families trying to protect their home and their way of life. Just like his own family back at the ranch. The second day brought new challenges as Samuel was put to work around the village. Despite his injury, he was expected to help with daily tasks under the watchful eyes of his guards. He carried water, helped repair shelters, and assisted with other manual labor. The work was hard, but it gave Samuel a chance to observe the Apache way of life up close. He watched mothers teaching their children, elders sharing wisdom, and warriors training for the constant threat of conflict with white settlers and soldiers. He began to understand that their fierce reputation came from a desperate need to protect everything they held dear. Ayana appeared throughout the day, always finding reasons to be near where Samuel was working. She would bring him water or food, check on his wound, or simply observe him as he interacted with other members of the village. Samuel noticed that she seemed to be evaluating him as if trying to decide something important. That evening, as the village prepared for the Chief's Council meeting, Ayana approached Samuel again. This time she seemed nervous, glancing around more frequently than usual. "Samuel," she said quietly, "there is something you must know before the council meets." Samuel set down the bundle of firewood he had been carrying and gave her his full attention. "What is it?" Ayana took a deep breath, as if gathering courage for what she was about to say. "Some of the warriors want to torture you before they kill you. They believe it will send a strong message to other white men who might think about entering our territory." Samuel felt his blood run cold, but he forced himself to remain calm. "And the others?" "The others want to keep you alive as a hostage, to trade for safe passage when we move to our winter grounds. But either way, double quote," she paused, struggling with the words. "Either way, I'm not going home," Samuel finished for her. Ayana nodded, her eyes filled with an emotion Samuel couldn't quite identify. "There might be another way," she said softly, "but it would require great courage from both of us." Before Samuel could ask what she meant, the sound of drums began echoing through the valley. The council meeting was about to begin, and his fate would soon be decided. Ayana squeezed his hand briefly, a gesture that sent warmth through his entire body despite the fear gnawing at his heart. "Whatever happens," she whispered, "know that not all Apache see you as an enemy." As the warriors came to escort him to the council meeting, Samuel carried those words with him like a talisman. He didn't know what Ayana had meant about another way, but he sensed that his relationship with this remarkable young woman was about to become much more complicated than either of them had anticipated. The council circle was illuminated by a large fire that cast dancing shadows on the faces of the Apache elders and warriors gathered around it. Samuel was forced to sit in the center, his hands still bound, while the chief and his advisors debated his fate in rapid Apache. Though he couldn't understand the words, the tone and gestures made it clear that the discussion was heated. Ayana sat with the other women on the outer edge of the circle. But Samuel could feel her eyes on him throughout the proceedings. Occasionally, she would catch his gaze and offer him a barely perceptible nod of encouragement. Though he wasn't sure what she wanted him to do, the warrior who had captured Samuel spoke first. His voice filled with anger as he pointed accusingly at the prisoner. Samuel understood enough to know. The man was recounting the trespass at the sacred water source and arguing for immediate execution. Several other warriors nodded in agreement, their faces hard with years of conflict and loss. An older warrior, his hair streaked with gray, stood to speak next. His arguments seemed more measured, more strategic. Samuel guessed this was the faction that wanted to keep him alive as a bargaining tool. The debate continued for what felt like hours, with various members of the council adding their voices to one side or the other. Finally, the chief raised his hand for silence. The entire gathering fell quiet as he stood and walked slowly around the fire, his weathered face thoughtful. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "The white man has violated our sacred water," he said in English, ensuring Samuel understood every word. "By our law, this crime demands death. But these are difficult times, and we must think not just of justice, but of survival." Samuel's heart hammered in his chest as the chief continued. "We will give you a choice, white man. You may die with honor now, fighting our best warrior in single combat. If by some miracle you win, you will be free to go, or—" The chief paused, his eyes moving to where Ayanna sat. "Or you may face a different kind of trial." The chief beckoned to Ayanna, who rose gracefully and walked into the circle. Samuel was confused by her presence until the chief began speaking again. "My daughter Ayanna has spoken for you," the chief said, and Samuel felt his world shift. Ayanna was the chief's daughter. "She believes you are not like other white men, that you have honor and respect. She has requested the right to test this belief." Ayanna stepped forward, her chin raised with determination. "Father, I invoke the ancient law of the vision trial." A murmur of surprise rippled through the gathering. Several elders exchanged meaningful glances, while some of the warriors looked openly shocked. Samuel had no idea what was happening, but he could sense the significance of Ayanna's words. The chief's eyes narrowed as he studied his daughter. "The vision trial has not been invoked for many seasons, daughter. Do you truly understand what you ask?" "I do, father," Ayanna replied firmly. "I believe the spirits have brought this man to us for a reason. I request 3 days to prove his worth through the old tests." The chief was silent for a long moment, clearly wrestling with his daughter's request. Finally, he turned to address the council. "The vision trial is an ancient right that cannot be denied when properly invoked," he said. "If Ayanna believes the spirits have spoken, we must respect this. But know this, daughter, if the white man fails any part of the trial, he dies. And you will bear the responsibility for his actions." Ayanna nodded solemnly. "I accept this burden, father." The council meeting ended with this dramatic declaration, leaving Samuel more confused than ever. As the gathering dispersed, Ayanna approached him while the guards untied his bonds. "Come," she said quietly. "We have much to discuss and little time to prepare." She led him to a small hut on the outskirts of the village, away from curious eyes and listening ears. Once inside, she lit an oil lamp and turned to face him, her expression serious. "Samuel, do you trust me?" she asked directly. "You're the chief's daughter," he said, still trying to process this revelation. "You could have told me. Would it have changed anything?" She countered. "Would you have trusted me more or less if you knew?" Samuel considered this. "I don't know," he admitted. "But I do know that you've been the only person here to show me kindness. So yes, I trust you." Ayanna nodded, seeming satisfied with his answer. The vision trial is an ancient tradition that tests whether a person is worthy to become part of our tribe. It hasn't been used in many years, especially not for a white man. "What does it involve?" Samuel asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. 3 tests over 3 days, Ayanna explained. The test of courage, the test of wisdom, and the test of spirit. Each one is designed to reveal your true character. If you pass all 3, you will be accepted as a member of our tribe. If you fail even one, die, Samuel finished. Yes, she said simply. But there's something else you need to know. By invoking the vision trial on your behalf, I have bound myself to your fate. If you fail, I will be exiled from the tribe for poor judgment. If you succeed, she paused, her cheeks coloring slightly. If you succeed according to our ancient laws, we must be married. Samuel stared at her in shock. Married? But we barely know each other. Ayanna met his gaze steadily. I saw something in you from the moment you thanked me for tending your wound. Most white men see us as less than human. They take what they want and show no gratitude or respect. But you're different. You have honor, but marriage ... quote Samuel protested. Do you have a wife waiting for you? Ayanna asked. No, Samuel admitted. Then what is your objection? Do you find me so terrible that you would rather die than be bound to me? Samuel looked at her in the flickering lamplight, her intelligent eyes, her proud bearing, her obvious courage in standing up to her father and the entire council for a stranger. The truth was, he found her beautiful and fascinating, but the situation was overwhelming. It's not that, he said carefully. You're remarkable, Ayanna, but this is all happening so fast. And I don't understand your customs or your people. Ayanna smiled for the first time since he'd known her. That is why we have 3 days. If you truly cannot accept our ways by the end of the trials, I will help you escape, even if it means my exile. Samuel felt the weight of her sacrifice settling on his shoulders. She was risking everything for him, a stranger who had stumbled into her world by accident. Why? He asked. Why are you willing to risk so much for me? Ayanna was quiet for a moment, then spoke softly. My grandmother was a medicine woman with the gift of sight. Before she died, she told me that I would one day meet a man who would come from the direction of the rising sun, wounded and lost. She said this man would bring change to our people, both good and difficult, but that he would be important to our survival. She looked directly into Samuel's eyes. You came from the east, wounded by our arrow, lost in the desert. Perhaps you are the man from her vision. Perhaps not. But I must know the truth. Samuel felt a chill that had nothing to do with the desert night. And if I'm not the man from the vision? Then we will both pay the price for my mistake, Ayanna said simply. But I believe the spirits don't make accidents. You were meant to find our sacred water. You were meant to be captured. You were meant to meet me. As Samuel lay down to sleep that night, his mind raced with everything that had happened. Tomorrow would begin 3 days that would determine not only whether he lived or died, but whether he was destined for a life he could never have imagined. The thought terrified and excited him in equal measure outside the hut. He could hear the desert wind whistling through the canyon walls. And he wondered if it was carrying messages from the spirits Ayanna believed had brought them together. One way or another, he would soon find out if their faith was justified. The first test would come with the dawn, and Samuel knew there would be no turning back once it began. His old life as a simple cattle rancher was already becoming a memory. Whatever lay ahead, he would face it with the courage Ayanna believed she had seen in him. Because now her fate was tied to his own dot as he drifted toward sleep. Samuel's last conscious thought was of Ayanna's dark eyes, and the way she had looked at him when she spoke of her grandmother's vision. Whether driven by destiny or desperation, they were now bound together in a way that would change both of their lives forever. Dawn broke clear and cold over the hidden valley as Samuel prepared for his first trial. Ayanna had explained that the test of courage would require him to prove his bravery not through violence, but through facing his deepest fears. She couldn't tell him exactly what to expect. As the trials were different for each person, the entire village gathered to witness the proceedings, their faces ranging from curious to skeptical to openly hostile. Samuel noticed that many of the warriors seemed convinced he would fail, while some of the elders watched with the patient interest of people who had seen many such trials over the years. The chief stood before a large boulder that had been carved with ancient symbols. Samuel Wright, he announced, you will descend into the Cave of Echoes alone. Inside, you will face whatever the spirits choose to show you. You may not emerge until you have conquered your fear or until ... He paused meaningfully. You no longer can. Two warriors led Samuel to a narrow opening in the canyon wall that he hadn't noticed before. The cave mouth yawned like a hungry beast, disappearing into absolute darkness. They handed him a single torch and stepped back. "Remember," one of the warriors said with a cruel smile, "many men have entered this cave. Not all have returned with their sanity intact." Samuel glanced back at Ayana, who stood with her father. Her face was composed, but he could see the worry in her eyes. She nodded once, a gesture of encouragement and faith that gave him the courage to step forward. The cave was immediately colder than the desert outside, and Samuel's torch cast flickering shadows on the rough walls. The passage wound downward, deeper into the earth, until all traces of natural light disappeared behind him. The only sounds were his own breathing and the soft crackle of the torch flame. After what felt like an hour of walking, Samuel emerged into a large underground chamber. The walls here were covered in ancient paintings, warriors on horseback, buffalo herds, battles, and strange symbols that seemed to shift and dance in the torchlight. But it was the silence that unnerved him most. Even the sound of his breathing seemed to be swallowed by the darkness. Then he heard it, voices echoing from somewhere deeper in the cave. Familiar voices that made his heart race with recognition. His father's voice, angry and disappointed. His brother's voice, weak with pain. His mother's voice, crying. "Samuel abandoned us?" His father's voice echoed through the chamber. "He went chasing after cattle and left us to lose everything. The bank will take the ranch because of his selfishness. He's probably dead already," his brother's voice added. "Killed by Apache savages because he was too proud to ask for help." Samuel knew the voices weren't real, but they struck at his deepest guilt and fear. He had left his family vulnerable to pursue the lost cattle. What if they were suffering while he was trapped here? What if his father was right and his actions had doomed them all? The voices grew louder, more accusatory. They were joined by other familiar sounds, his mother weeping, his father cursing, the sound of their belongings being loaded onto wagons as they lost their home. Samuel sank to his knees, overwhelmed by the weight of his perceived failures, but then another voice cut through the cacophony, Ayana's voice. Calm and clear. "Courage is not the absence of fear, Samuel. It is doing what must be done despite the fear. You came here to save your family, not to abandon them. That choice, right or wrong, came from love." Samuel looked up, though he couldn't see her in the darkness. "Ayana, how are you here?" "I am not here," her voice replied. "This is your trial, your choice. But know that courage sometimes means accepting that you cannot control everything. You can only control your own actions and choices." The chamber fell silent again, and Samuel found himself truly alone with his thoughts. He realized that the voices of his family had been speaking his own fears back to him. Yes, he had taken a risk leaving home to search for the cattle, but staying home and watching his family slowly lose everything to debt would not have been courage. It would have been cowardice, standing up. Samuel spoke to the darkness. "I did what I thought was right. I can't control what happens to my family while I'm gone, but I can control what I do now. I choose to face whatever comes next." As soon as he spoke these words, the oppressive atmosphere in the cave lifted. The ancient paintings on the walls seemed to glow with warm light, and Samuel felt a sense of peace wash over him. He had passed the first test. The climb back to the surface felt shorter than the descent, and when Samuel emerged from the cave, the sun was directly overhead. The gathered Apache watched him with new respect as he walked steadily toward the chief, his torch still burning despite hours in the cave. "The spirits have spoken," the chief announced. "You have passed the test of courage." Ayana smiled with obvious relief. But Samuel knew the hardest trials were still ahead. The second day brought the test of wisdom, which took place in the village itself. Samuel was presented with a series of problems that the Apache faced in their daily lives, and he had to propose solutions that showed understanding of their culture and values. The first challenge involved a dispute between two families over grazing rights for their horses. Samuel listened carefully to both sides, then suggested a solution based on seasonal rotation that he had learned from managing his family's ranch. The Apache elders nodded approvingly at his practical approach. The second challenge was more complex: how to deal with white settlers who were encroaching on Apache hunting grounds. This was clearly a test of whether Samuel could think beyond his own people's interests. War will bring soldiers, Samuel said carefully, but allowing the encroachment will eventually destroy your way of life. Perhaps the answer is to find allies among the white settlers who respect your rights and use them to pressure the government for a formal treaty that recognizes your territory. Several warriors scoffed at this suggestion, but the chief and elders exchanged interested glances. It was a creative solution that showed Samuel could think like a diplomat rather than just a fighter. The final wisdom challenge was the most personal. Samuel was asked what he would do if he had to choose between loyalty to his birth family and loyalty to his adopted Apache family. Samuel considered this carefully before answering. True loyalty means seeking solutions that honor both families rather than choosing sides. If conflict arose, I would work to build bridges and understanding between the two peoples, because hatred and division only bring suffering to everyone. The chief nodded slowly. You have shown wisdom beyond your years, Samuel Wright. You understand that true strength comes from unity, not division. 2 trials down, 1 to go. But Samuel knew the test of spirit would be the most difficult of all. The 3rd day brought Samuel before a gathering of the tribe's medicine men and women, including Ayanna herself, who he learned was training to follow in her grandmother's footsteps. The test of spirit would determine whether he could truly embrace the Apache way of life or if his heart would always remain divided. The ritual began at sunset with Samuel seated in the center of a medicine circle. The shamans burned sacred herbs and began chanting in ancient Apache dialects. As the smoke filled his lungs and the rhythmic chanting continued, Samuel felt his consciousness begin to shift. In his vision, Samuel found himself standing in 2 places at once, his family's ranch and the Apache village. He could see his father struggling to work the land alone, his mother worrying by the window, his brother still recovering from his injury. But he could also see Ayanna teaching children about medicinal plants, the chief making decisions that would affect his people's survival, and warriors preparing to defend their home. A voice spoke from the smoke, though Samuel couldn't tell if it belonged to Ayanna's grandmother or some other spiritual presence. You stand between 2 worlds, Samuel Wright. You cannot serve both unless you truly become part of both. Are you willing to carry the responsibility of being a bridge between peoples? Are you willing to fight for peace when others choose war? Are you willing to lose yourself to find a greater purpose? Samuel felt the weight of the decision settling on his soul. Accepting meant giving up his old life completely and taking on responsibilities he had never imagined. It meant potentially being rejected by his birth family and facing constant suspicion from both white and Apache communities. But as he looked at the vision of Ayanna teaching the children, he realized that some things were worth any sacrifice. This remarkable woman had risked everything for him based on her grandmother's vision and her own faith in his character. How could he offer her anything less than his complete commitment? I accept, Samuel said, and felt something fundamental change within him. The vision faded, and Samuel found himself back in the medicine circle. But everything looked different now, more vivid, more connected. He could sense the spirits that Ayanna and her people spoke of, could feel the life force that flowed through all things. When he stood, the gathered shamans nodded with approval. The chief stepped forward, his stern expression softened with something that might have been pride. You have passed all 3 trials, Samuel Wright, the chief announced. You are no longer a stranger in our land. You are Apache. The village erupted in celebration, though Samuel noticed some warriors still looked skeptical. Change would not come easily or quickly, but it would come.